Hey now, welcome to Conversations with Keyshawn and Alexandra. We are two longtime friends with a tendency toward reflective, thought-provoking conversation. Sometimes our conversations are random, but other times, like now, we reflect based on themes in media. So tonight, we are talking about the second episode from season 6 of Queen Sugar and Dream with Them Deeply. So, uh, I appreciate when shows are thematic with their episode titles. So
Mm-hmm.
last week was If You Could Enter Their Dreaming
Enter their dreams, right? Okay.
and Dream with Them Deeply. So it sounds like it's either going to be a story in the titles or like
Mm-hmm.
a song in the titles, or like when we get to episode 10, right?
Okay.
I feel like all of them will have linked together. It's all good, girl. We are
I was
all
like,
working
shut up,
from home.
Roman.
We all know what it is. Because look, that's the thing. Even if you tell all the humans in the house, all the adults in the house, there'll always be a kid who don't give a damn.
Or an animal.
Or an animal who don't
It
give
was
a
like, whatever. Zoom what? I don't care. Yeah.
all right. So yes,
But to your point about the theme, I was literally when I was watching it, I was like, is this the lyrics of the opening song? Because you know how Michelle Njotel is like dreams never die, take flight, something. I was like, are these part of the lyrics of the theme song? Because in the part of the theme song, she says dreams never die, take flight. Like that's like on repeat. And it's basically just instrumentals. So I was like, so this is the final season. They're speaking about dreams. Maybe there's going to be like some poetic closure on the dream theme. That was
you you know what, you now I'm gonna have to listen to the lyrics a little more deeply, because like you said, the only part from the theme song that I've ever caught is that little part. But yeah, okay.
notable.
Yes. So I don't necessarily have them in the order that they came on the screen, but kind of the order in which I started jotting things down.
Okay. Okay.
um, so of course, it all starts with Prosper, right? He's the
Right.
reason why they are in the hospital. Um, and so some of the things that like immediately came to mind are kind of that blood versus water, right? Chosen family, which is something that you and I have talked about on many occasions because we're a chosen family.
Exactly.
But one of the differences between us, which is kind of a difference between the Bordelons and the Prospers, is, you um, come from a large family in terms of like in the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where I, in my home growing up, was very small family, just myself and my mother. Where
Right.
the Bordelons, they are, they have a nice size in the home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Coming up, where we don't actually have a whole lot of backstory for Prosper, but as far as the people that we have encountered or that we've experienced um, in relation to Prosper, Prosper has been this widow. He, started dating a season or so ago. Um, and there's this daughter, it seems just the one, and she hasn't been around in the time that we've known the Borderlands. So
Mm-mm.
his attraction to this larger, kind of stronger, tight knit family is not too different from, my attraction to your family dynamic. Because as I was saying last week, just that whole concept of like siblings is, or being raised with siblings is something
Right.
that I'm, so like, that is so interesting.
It is. It is. And I mean, you're right. It's Prosper. I don't think we haven't gotten a lot of his story with the exception of obviously he was, you know, befriended into the family, like you said, chosen to be kind of adopted into the family once he was widowed. And that's all we know about him. And then just the one daughter, Billy, that's the only child that we know him to have. And it's interesting because I don't know if I knew that Billy was even a daughter. I remember him saying I used to carry a picture of Billy around like the sonogram, But I don't remember if he said in episode 1 and she such and such and such and such, because Billy is kind of a, genderless name or gender fluid name. So I figured it's just the one daughter, and then that kind of helps the viewer to understand his relationship with Ralph Angel is like the son that he never had, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And, as we talked about, him kind of filling in that gap in the absence of Ernest.
Right.
So, and this is something that comes up in, blood family and chosen family too, is that just because someone is family, just because someone loves you, do they know what's best for you? And that's something we see with Vi all the time, right? Does she actually know what's best, or is she just so strong in her convictions that it's easier to just let her, be right?
I feel like in this episode, of course, was an opportunity for us to hear like two different perspectives of Aunt Vi's role, somebody who is a borderline versus someone who is not a borderline. So hearing Nova's perspective, Nola, New Orleans, sorry, y'all. You know what I mean? Nova's perspective of, okay, well, this is why she's this way, or this is why we kind of honor her this way. And then Billy's perspective of like, yeah, but she ain't got no boundaries. She doesn't respect anybody's boundaries. I think also with Vi, because Vi doesn't have any children of her own, I feel like there's an extra surge of need to mother or need to kind of maternalize her experiences or relationships with the kids, that it kind of just extends across the board. And then also I think she just steps firmly into that matriarchal role of, even when my brother Ernest was still here, it was me and him against the world. Now he's gone, it's me. Like, I am responsible not only for the Borderlones, but for the whole town.
Right.
Like, she's the mayor of St. Joe without ever being elected, basically.
That, absolutely. And, since we are talking about Vi, it made me think of like that when keeping it real, or in her case, like when caring too much goes wrong. Because she's not used to getting a lot of pushback, but she's messing with a city girl now, and the big city girl was like, listen, I know you love him, but you're not actual kin to us, and I'm the big bad city girl, so I'm about to tell you what it is and what it ain't.
Right. And this is my father that you're talking about. So yes, he's your friend and you've been friends with him for over 30 years, but this is my father. And like she later said in the episode to Nova, like, to Charlie, you don't really know anybody's relationship. Like, only the people in the relationship know the relationship and what it's really about. Right. And so Vi often likes to pull well, I'm the onlyest one in this person's life. Me. Everybody else is secondary, even their children. So yeah, when Billy showed up, Billy Badass, when she came in with her little clutch and rolling suitcase, I was like, oh, okay. And then I love the actress as well. Just, seeing her on TV is great. When I saw her come in, I was like, everybody's about to get kicked out. As soon as I saw her with the paperwork, I have his power of attorney, I have his supplemental and, catastrophic insurance. I'm over here taking notes like, I need to get catastrophic insurance for my parents in their 60s because. So yeah, it was this was a great episode. I mean, for so many reasons. I think I'm also cognizant of the fact that we're in the last season. And so for me, each episode is either an opportunity to meet a new character, potentially, like with Billy, or to say goodbye to a character that we already know.
Right. Because with Billy too, yes, she is his daughter. There's no denying that, right? I mean, as far as we know, there's no denying that. As far as we know. But where has she been? Why has she
Chicago? She's been busy.
Will we get a satisfying amount of backstory to explain whatever the dynamics of their relationship are? Because that's the thing too. That's another thing about final seasons, right? Is like, we know the clock is ticking on how much storytelling they will get to do. So it's like, but how deep can they zoom in on that when they need to close out all of the other storylines? So it'll just be interesting. But yes, Billy badass indeed.
Girl, she was like, what you're not going to do is anything that you've been doing for the last, 12 hours and the last 12 months for that matter.
And 12
And
years.
even 12 years, for that matter. And like you said, because we don't really know the relationship, I just imagine, okay, Prosper's a widow, which means his spouse died. So one could think that Prosper was married to his wife, aka Billy Badass's mom, until she died. And then because the relationship might have been estranged, we can assume, between Prosper and Billy, then her natural thing as a good daughter would be, hey, Dad, COVID is running rampant. You are at high risk. You come here to Chicago where it's safe, where I can take care of you with myself. Maybe she has a spouse. I don't know. We haven't mentioned that. And my children, be around your grandkids. We'll take care of you. He declined her offer and chose to stay there. Whereas, like, I imagine I'm at my parents' house right now, hence different location. I'm just going to change locations every week just to keep it interesting. I'm at my parents' house right now. They're both in their 60s. My mom's preparing for retirement. She literally just announced her retirement yesterday at her job. And, super exciting. And I can only imagine if I was out of state during COVID and for some reason they weren't able to really provide the care that they needed, and I said, hey, come to my big house in wherever, and they declined, I would feel some type of way, especially if there was no one else. Now, granted, I have 4 siblings. So if they chose not to leave, that's different because they have 4 other children here. But Billy's an only child, as far as we know. Yeah. So for him to kind of push back on an already potentially estranged relationship and to say no, she's already coming down to bring the heat as soon as she gets to the hospital. She's coming in on fire automatically.
So, conversely, so my mother has been retired, right? Because my mother is comfortably in her 70s, but she was medically retired before 65. And there was a time, I want to say like late 19 going into 2019 going into 2020, where because of some of the things that were happening in her living situation, there was a conversation about, if necessary, her coming to live with me. We do live in different states, in different parts of the country, a different time zone. But, she made it very clear that that would be the absolute last resort for her. And so when, so then 2020 started 2020. And as I started looking towards the end of my lease and realizing, okay, she's not coming here. I actually don't need all the space that I currently have or, had at the time, because I moved into that space thinking that I would be entertaining, right? So clearly 2020 was not about that entertaining life. And so even with that, so I chose to downsize, right? And so, and she now lives in like an independent senior complex. And since she's been in that new space, I haven't been there. Mind you, I don't have, children or, grandbabies for her to like visit or what have you. But what do they say? Out of an abundance of caution.
There you go.
I have not seen her very much since the pandemic.
Right.
I saw her at what turned out to be like the weekend before everybody started shutting things down.
Right.
And then I did make a trip up there in September a year ago now, to help her prepare for her move. Okay. But even then I was, very cautious, very mindful. At that time I was working from home, so I had very limited exposures. And even when I was around her, it was uncomfortable for me because I did not, and of course that made it hard for her because I didn't want to be all huggy, kissy.
Of course.
I was out in the world, right? And her being older, this before the vaccine had even come into play. So I can definitely see, and also when you think about the time that she would have been inviting him to stay with her, what, he was supposed to fly up there on a plane?
He would
Like,
have been
no.
flying, or she would have had to come and get him and then drive him back. I mean, because you figure the distance from Chicago to New Orleans, it's basically just straight up and
Right.
slightly to the left. I mean,
Yeah.
slightly east. So it's probably,
That's
I
comparable to
mean,
my distance from my mother.
yeah, your
Like,
distance
I'm
from
in
like
Texas,
Michigan.
she's in Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like,
So
it's
next state
about,
over, next state. So basically,
exactly. It's about the same. So you figure it's a smooth 12, 15-hour drive. You know what I mean? However, even if it was a plane ride home, then it's like the goal is just to get you here. And to her point, when Billy arrives at this little rinky-dink hospital in I'm gonna say St. Claude. That's an actual place. St. Josephine ain't a real place in New Orleans, just so you know. But St. Joe, when they arrive in St. Joe, this little teeny tiny hospital, she's thinking, this is my father.
right.
My mother has already passed. We don't know how long ago that was.
Right.
We're in the middle of a pandemic. He's not experiencing COVID symptoms. He's experiencing head trauma, but is in a hospital where COVID is everywhere.
Right.
So I don't want him here, for
Right.
one. Two, you people, the Bordelons, specifically Aunt Vi, how do I know that, like, was I really the first call? Did you, I don't know. I mean, her relationship between them, it's not like she has a great relationship with Aunt Vi and they're kikiing. And notice the only person that Billy Badass actually warmly welcomed was Charlie.
Right.
And what's funny is that I had a moment when I saw that scene, I was like, oh, the light-skinned people going to get along. That's the light-skinned people, they friends.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. I peeped that right away because they low-key look like they could be siblings.
Sisters.
And
right.
Because Charlie absolutely stands out in the context of her family.
Yes.
I didn't know that Billy was going to show up and be such a visible contrast from Prosper, which I'm like, we need more detail. Who is her mom?
What if her mom really was Charlie's mom? What if her and Charlie have the same mom?
You better.
Ooh. I mean, that would be kind of fun. Sprinkle that in later. Just, go on with a bang. Why not?
Right. So, but if not, is
right.
her mom white, or is she just a very fair? I mean, because if all this starts in Louisiana, her mother could easily be,
Creole.
Right.
Exactly. Right.
So before we leave Vi, and of course we'll kind of tap on Vi a few times because
she came up a lot. Connected. I feel like this was really her episode, to be honest, even though Prosper was the catalyst, but I feel like Vi, I saw her a lot in this episode.
We solved the mystery of who was behind the motel door. Lo and behold,
it wasn't her raggedy old ex-husband.
It was
now
her with dealing with that raggedy ass husband.
Because we were saying last time, I was like, it's either him or maybe you were like, maybe it was somebody that was kind of like you said, the next one, the person who came after her, kind of thing. But
and when I jotted what I jotted was protecting her successor. And then later I was like, it's interesting because usually when we think of successor, it's like it has this positive connotation, right? It's like, our children, the people who are following in our footsteps, the legacy, all that kind of stuff. But really, successor is just the person after you who's going to do the thing or who is doing the thing that you
did.
And that could unfortunately also be with the abusive man.
Yeah. Yeah.
The kind of going back to what we were joking about when we first cut this, recording on, kids are not necessarily concerned about what the adults are concerned about. Mm-mm. So you can't be shocked that he would want to reach out to his dad because, of course, his relationship we know Jimmy Dale does not respect women.
Period.
His relationship with his son
could be
completely different.
He could be the model father, to his son, because we don't know, because Aunt Vi didn't, to our knowledge, Aunt Vi didn't have any kids. Now we could find out.
But that's because he beat her so badly.
That she could, exactly. So it's like he essentially is the reason why she doesn't have any children.
Right.
So then for her to protect, in a sense, or safe house her successor in this other woman, is also maybe her really just it's such a tough call because when I saw the scene, I'm like, oh, okay, so it's not him, it's just his woman or whoever,
Right.
and she has a child.
But you
So
could
when the
feel the wistfulness in Vi's eyes, like, ooh, that
I'm like,
hurt me.
do you have to help everybody? Because I don't, first of all, I like Hollywood and Vi as a couple. I don't really understand them, but I like them as a couple. I don't like when she's dishonest with him because Hollywood is so vulnerable with her. He's so honest, even when it's uncomfortable. He leans into the uncomfortable conversations. He asks all the questions. He holds space for her and himself. He's making moves, and she's literally sneaking around so
Yes.
that she can help, aka control, her successor through help really knowing where she is and what's going on with her. And I'm like, but you're lying to Hollywood to do that. I don't like
Yeah.
that. That was
I
disappointing for me.
especially, yeah, lying to him at all, not cool. Missing his big event and lying to him was definitely like, girl, what are we doing? Because if he had missed the opening of her restaurant, if he
Right.
had lied to do it, girl, fire in the city.
Unforgiving. She would crucify him for something like that. And so, and for him, and but you know what? Again, this is why I like Hollywood as a character because he didn't pop off on her because that's not who he is.
Right.
He's cool, calm, and collected. And I like what he said when she did finally show up and they're watching the segment on the news. Maybe I didn't need my good luck charm after all. I'm like, you know what? That's cool because you gonna be all right. She's great. You together are cool. And you're also just as powerful in this community as she is.
Right.
You're not underneath her wing because she tries to shove everybody under the Aunt Vi umbrella,
Right.
including Hollywood. And I'm like, but his name is Hollywood, but he's gonna take up space. Like you can't shove him in the pocket. That's not gonna happen. So I was proud to see him stand in that or sit in it without it kind of just dirt off your shoulder, like not even phased, you know?
Right. And I also that's exactly something that I noted, like, not so two things, one that I just thought of right now. The overall concept of celebrating success without your partner, right? Because a lot of times when we think of like why a person wants a life partner is someone to share all these milestones with. And
Right.
again, he, as we saw, he didn't think that he would do that. We don't know if he didn't know if he could do that,
Right.
but the other piece is that is usually a story that's flipped, right? It's usually that you know, the woman doesn't feel like, not usually, but you know,
I know
often
what you mean.
it'll be that
Yeah.
like, oh, you know, with it's not complete if my man isn't by my side, or if
Exactly.
isn't by my side. And he, the way he spoke, like my good luck charm, like he does view her as, I
Mm-hmm.
may not be able to get by. And you
Right.
know, and we know so many relationships are codependent, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that can be true even of the relationships we like to see.
Right.
Something else with Hollywood is keeping, like keeping your head in the game or your eye on the prize,
Mm-hmm.
even as life is lifing, right? Because he has a strong relationship with Prosper too. And even if he hadn't, now Prosper has been living with them for the better part of the last year, right?
Right.
So he's definitely impacted by the fact that Prosper is in the hospital,
Of
but he
course.
has this opening scheduled, he has this interview scheduled, he's got to
Mm-hmm.
keep his head in the game. And that's something that a
Yep.
lot of us, especially women, have to navigate is, you know,
Right.
I'm trying to hold it down for my family, I'm trying to hold it down in my relationship, but I have a
Mm-hmm.
presentation tomorrow, and I'm, because I am a woman, if I flinch even a little bit, people are going to talk about it being because I'm a woman. So
Right.
I got to keep my eye on the
Focus.
prize, right?
Right. Right.
um and then two, and this is something that a lot of us did too, starting something new during COVID, which at first we were thinking, oh, COVID's here. Oh man, I'm not gonna be able to do nothing.
Nothing.
All my dreams on the back burner.
All of them.
But no, he was like, forget that.
No,
I'm about to start this new thing. I already
right.
had it lined up. Let
Mm-hmm.
me, I have to change directions a little bit, but I'm getting
I'm
it
doing
done.
this. Yeah.
And I mean, in our lives, we've seen that, you know, like you were probably doing some stuff virtually before you before this, but of course this definitely amped it up, you know,
Right.
the next, not just level, but like several levels.
Several levels. Yeah. It made it so that anytime I get an invitation now to anything, I'm automatically assuming that it's virtual until I see an address. And I'm like, I gotta go somewhere? Like, what do you have to go outside? What are you saying? I don't know. You hear none of my pod, but
yes.
Travel time. Pish posh, get out of here. We don't do such things. I don't subscribe to that. I'm in the metaverse now. This is where we live. So no, you're absolutely right. And I like what you said about understanding that sometimes the dynamic of like the person who is thriving, who's doing well, who's glowing up, who's leveling up, who's really making their mark, when they have a spouse that isn't supportive, that's different than having a spouse who's usually your ride or die number one cheerleader, good luck charm, and then they don't show up. That's hurtful.
Right.
It's actually hurtful because it's kind of the feeling of, I know you want me to win, so what is it that could have possibly taken you away from this particular moment? It must be super fucking important. And she didn't just not show up, she lied and didn't show up. Right. And so, especially when I heard her say, oh, something with the plumbing, I'm like, this is your husband. If you tell him something's wrong with your restaurant, he's probably going to try to rush over there to make sure everything's okay. Yeah. And then when he gets there, your ass isn't there. So for all I know, this is me filling in my imagination. He finished his interview. He went to Vi's Pies. She wasn't there. Then he went home. So he's at home and could easily be fuming.
Right.
But he's like, I'm cool, calm, collected. Hollywood, it's all good. You're going to tell me what's going on. Maybe we'll find out next episode.
Well,
but for right now,
that's the other thing too. Like if you, so I'm not Hollywood, but I'm from Hollywood.
There you go.
Which isn't to say I'm an actor, but I am, you know, I'm pretty laid back in general, right? And I can definitely sit back, chill, and let you hang yourself.
That's right.
Yeah. So tell me about your day. That was the other thing. The lie that she chose is so easy to refute. If not a single, I know everybody in this town.
I know everybody in this town.
If a plumber had come, that's verifiable. Like, come on, sis.
And if you knew the segment that he was doing was only for a period of time, when he's done, where do you think he's going to go first? I'm surprised they didn't even show that. Maybe they didn't need to. Just use our imagination. But
might have mentioned. Did he say
that he went by the restaurant? I didn't hear that.
Unless I just filled in that blank.
Yeah, I was going to say, I filled that in on my own because I'm just thinking like him. You know, I'm thinking like how he thinks. And this is already, because it was one thing for him to kind of say about the paper bag and whose is this, and oh no, I'll take care of it, cool, and he's gonna move on. Right. But what I'm seeing with Hollywood and Vi's relationship, again, like we talked about last week, there's obviously an age difference between them. You know, we mentioned last week that she's close to the age of his mother, who's passed. Mm-hmm. So sometimes what happens in the, what'd you call it, May, December, their relationships like January, July, damn near. I don't know. It's maybe even a wider. But what happens sometimes in those relationships, as the younger person continues to evolve and mature into who they are, the older person who may not have been consciously aware of the fact that there was a power dynamic that existed because of their age, starts to recognize like, oh, okay, so you like grown now. Right. And it's like, well, yeah, I'm becoming all the ages you've already been now. I'm becoming a different person in a sense, not, you know, try to challenge you, but just because I'm growing.
Right. Because his money, like he got money, he wanted to share it right away. Right. So that didn't change the dynamic. Mm-hmm. And before, his career didn't necessarily, his career itself didn't put him in a position of power, but his career did give him a sense of power because it forced her to miss him.
Correct, because it took him away from her physically
for extended periods of time.
Right.
Their whole dynamic has been shifting, in the time that we've known them for certain. And then, like you said, just like if you met him and he was in his 30s, if he's now in his 40s getting into his 50s, or what have you, whole different person. Because when you and I met, how old were we, girl?
I was in my I just turned 30.
Okay.
And so I was in my technically in my 30s.
The reason I want to say you might not, mathematically, I'm like, that may not be right. But I feel like I met you right before your 28th birthday because you introduced me to the concept of golden birthdays.
Oh, no, you're right. You're right. Yes, correct. You're right. So yeah, right. Just shy. Yeah, you're right. Just shy of 30.
So we met in our 20s, right? And now we're in our 40s. So even thinking about how, not necessarily our dynamic, that too, but think about like who we were when we were in our 20s, who we were in our 30s, and who we are now. So like having, if any one person had been in a relationship with us that whole time, they would have gotten
every single variation from one decade to the next, which is interesting because thinking about that made me think about the relationship between Nova and Billy. So when Vi was like, well, you need to go talk to your friend, and I'm like, y'all friends?
So
is your friend?
Okay, look, you got me rearranging my notes because I was gonna talk about Charlie first and then get to Nova later, but yes, Nova said when they were in the room together, you owe me. So okay, of course, and I hate to
what? I was like, oh, you're friends.
Right.
Because unless you killed somebody and she hid the body, she got secrets about your sexual activities from back in the day when y'all were teenagers or in your 20s.
Right. That, because and as a queer person, I hate to do this, but unfortunately, almost anytime there's like mention of Nova knowing a woman, I'm like, what's the history? What's the story?
Same. Same.
So, and then, that you owe me, I'm like, now I can't necessarily think of a context where I would say that to an ex just because we were involved at one point. So I feel like it's a little deeper, maybe, but it could just be you owe me because I've kept your secret for all these years.
Yeah.
So, since we are,
and that's where I was leaning toward the you owe me because I've kept the secret. And then they're obviously the ones who I guess are closest in age, because again, taking into consideration, even though Charlie and Billy Badass are part of Light Skin Gang, they didn't grow up together necessarily because Charlie was only there in the summers. So Nova would have been the one that she would have befriended in the Bordelon family to kind of, because Prosper was friends with Ernest, and she would have been the daughter who maybe she only came in the summers. I don't know. I don't know. I need more information about Billy as well. But yes, but continue.
Nova also seems to be making another new connection.
Oh, yes, Mr. Dominic, who she assumed had a girlfriend when in fact it was his sister. I love that scene. I was like, oh, see, this is why you got to watch TV, because some people are trying to watch TV and do other things, but it's the subtleties in the dialogue, because when Nova went from, and again, acting is more than dialogue, okay? So Nova went from inside the doorway with the door partially opened, partially closed, and was like, oh, you guys are high school sweethearts. And he's like, no, that's my sister. Oh, well, let me come on the porch then, Dominic, and let's talk about this. Let me show you from head to toe as I hold the casserole you have handed me. Yes. I was like, okay, body language. Okay.
And this is, everybody on this show is phenomenal, truly. But that was something too, like you can't, that definitely, her whole body was like, oh, word?
Oh, your sister? Well, I just want to go to bed. And I'm like, do you now?
That I also was like, okay, word choice.
Word choice, because all that, like, I'm so tired, I'm working so hard, exhausted, I just want to go to bed. Do you? Are you asking for a companion and young Dominic to join you?
And I almost thought that because we know that like when she wants something, she can turn it on.
Oh,
But
she will.
she also had made this like heavy-handed point of talking about being in love with Calvin. So I was like, okay, not tonight.
Not tonight. Not today.
Yes.
Not this day.
Right.
And he was like, you need to get some rest. So, I mean, there's also nuances that I like in the dialogue of this show that sometimes goes missed, where there is conversation about Black men's mental health, the conversation between Micah and who I would assume is a frat brother,
right,
talking about his experience with interactions with the police, the conversation between Hollywood and Micah when they're at the real spot and he's like, this is our war room, we're going to sit around and talk face to face through our stuff. Again, Ralph Angel,
right,
he gonna make me cry every episode. It's gonna be him. He's gonna be the one. We'll get to that later. But conversations on this show that really invite the viewer to understand, like, yes, we're going out of our way to let you know that Black men need support. Black men need safe spaces where they can talk about their emotions, where they can process their feelings. And so I like that Dominic's conversation with Nova was like, yeah, like, we need your voice. You need to rest, because Black women need rest. Black people need rest. And that's not something we always afford ourselves. So I appreciate that even if he is like attracted to her, but knows that she's still in love with this white man, Calvin, he's also like, and I also am attracted to you as an activist.
yes.
So like, let me take care of you in that way. And if you want to invite me to bed some other time, then maybe I'll bring some more casserole.
Because he also understands this brilliant segue. He understands like the big picture, right? Like, yes, I could be looking at your body, yada, yada tonight, but in the grand scheme of things, we need you to do the work, which segues into the exchange that Charlie had. Because that also was how can I have the greatest impact? Can I do the most in my small town where I can have the opportunity to learn the names of the people that my work affects? Or can I have a greater, higher, more vast impact at the state level, which will indirectly impact many more lives? And that's something that I, have had many a conversation about, even the times when I've like slightly toyed with the idea of, getting in the political ring. But even the last, several elections, and, with 45, of course, he made it so easy to get frustrated with him. But then when local elections would roll around, that was my opportunity to be like, hey guys, yes, that role is on the TV more, but these roles affect our everyday lives. This election, I almost dare say, is more important than the ones in November. And so, that's something that now Charlie is weighing too, like the right now, the right here versus the, larger scale. But then, it's also with Charlie, the concept of like someone is always watching, right? You think
that part
in this little bitty town, but these state people are like, oh no, we've seen what you've been doing. Right.
Oh, we've seen what you can do. Yeah.
And
we've seen what you can do. And it's interesting that you use that word, that phrase, someone's always watching, because not only are we watching you as a party, as a potential candidate, we're also watching you as a potential candidate to see what kind of ruckus and shenanigans you got going on, which is why old boy was like, so you need to go ahead and let us know now.
Right.
If you have anything going on, because if we want to advocate for you or endorse you as a candidate, we already know your past with Davis. We already know all the stuff you've been through in St. Joe. I feel like with Davis, that was national news. She's married to an NBA. Yeah, that was national news.
To pay the girl.
Hey the Girl, I think, became national news because the girl was like, I'm going to go to the press about them trying to pay me off to hide the sexual assault thing. I thought that was kind of the whole reason why the Charlie and Davis breakup was very media centric and explosive. And I feel like that's part of the reason why she went to St. Joe, to try to like hide, you know, in a sense, and then kind of put herself back out there as a politician. But yeah, I mean, that was the first thing I thought about, was like, now if you run for state senate, yes, you can have more impact, because people who don't remember their government class from the 8th grade, the executive level of government doesn't really have that much power as the legislative and the judicial. So if you become a state senator, you become part of the legislative branch of government, which means you actually influence political change on a national scale. So while she could be big fish in a small pond, she might be little fish in a big pond, but still could be influential. But, you know, I thought it was interesting that the party representatives that she met with made a note of letting her know, yes, we believe in you, and we also know you have shit.
Right.
So when she's like, no skeletons in my closet, I'm like, girl, then what you got? Mummies? Body bags?
Because that was, and that's exactly what I wrote, skeletons, because it made me, and of course we weren't privy to their entire conversation. So we, like, in theory, right, just because of the way that whole game works, yes, they absolutely know about that. And so sometimes when people ask you questions like that, it's because it's like, so we know, are you going to disclose it though? Because if
there you go,
disclose it, even though we know, it don't matter if we already know. What we want to know now is how honest and how much, and you know, how honest you are, how much integrity you have. So, that will be interesting. And then too, on the flip side, if someone is always watching just one or another thing about not Vi child, Nova, the V's. But the other thing about Nova, right, is that like now she's like, oh, folks are watching me for real. Like, I don't trust this phone line.
Tapping my phone, watching me. Well, I mean, when you write an expose about the police department,
law enforcement, girl, like what you think?
When you write an expose about law enforcement in a small town, and then you call the law enforcement the next day, and the result of the law enforcement interaction is the injury of a Black man, dude, you know they gonna rake you across the coals. And when I say they, I mean Black Twitter. Right. Is gonna rake you across the coals. Like, come on, Nova, you're not untouchable. You're an activist, but you're not untouchable. And in this case, she's being challenged in so many ways. And what I didn't like about the dialogue that she had on the porch with Dominic, when she was saying, you know, well, my personal life is kind of like my personal life. And it's like, girl, it's 2021. Ain't nobody got a personal life. Right. Once you put yourself out there as an activist, you don't have a personal life anymore. Right. Just like Charlie puts herself out there as a politician, she doesn't have a personal life anymore.
The thing too is not Vi, girl, Nova.
Nova, the other one, Auntie Vi, little Nova.
Is that Nova is also someone who had gotten very comfortable being a big fish in a small pond. And then she wrote this book that got national acclaim, and she still seems to be making that connection, like, oh, it's different now.
It's different.
And where, yeah, Charlie thought she could hide, but no, you still have the national eye.
Yes.
You talked about, or you mentioned Micah a little bit, and so with him and that frat brother, it also made me think about how he has now formed some chosen family, which is what, you know, Greek life is all about, right?
Right.
And also, and another poignant opportunity from a male perspective, but you know, that's true for all of us, is that trauma and triggers, they don't care how long it's been.
Right.
You know, he
was what, 16?
Right.
Roughly.
Yes,
right.
Because he had just gotten that car, because he had just gotten his license. So yeah.
He had just gotten his, right. Exactly.
So, so that was something, but you know, we didn't get a whole, I mean, that scene was a lot, but we didn't see him a lot in terms of like plot line development. We didn't see the professor.
Right.
we just saw that Hollywood kind of gave him that platform, but still let him know, like, no, you're still a kid to us.
You're still a kid. Like, oh, don't be trying to ask me for beer. That's not happening. You're not 21 yet. You're only at best a junior in college, maybe. Right. So which means you're not quite there yet. Right. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think touching on the fact that having a brutal interaction with the police officer is not something that you recover from as a Black person in America, because you're still a Black person in America, which means that the potential for another brutal, potentially fatal interaction with the police officer is already on your conscious radar. Yeah. So then when you pair that with an actual lived experience, the trauma of that keeps you in this perpetual cycle of fear constantly, anxiety constantly, which can lead to anger and resentment, or it can lead to depression and anxiety, and kind of somewhere on that spectrum in between, which is why I think for Micah, you know, that's the irony of, like you said, the interesting thing about pledging and being a part of Greek life is that sometimes that stays with you after graduation and that brotherhood really exists. And then other times, of course, it doesn't. And people just do it for the jackets and the step shows. But, you know, folks who are really in it for what it's meant for, that really matters. But I think also that when we think about the characters of this show, I mean, the patriarch obviously passed in the first season, and then we have these 3 children, 1 male child, 2 female children, and then now a matriarch, and then she has a spouse, and then one of the female children, Charlie, has a son. So there seems to be like somewhat of a balance of masculine and feminine characters on this show, which the masculine characters, maybe this is Ava's doing, but the masculine characters are showing a level of vulnerability that we don't often see in Black men on screen. And the feminine characters, or the female characters, are stepping firmly into positions of power and dominance, which we also don't necessarily see on TV. I'm gonna say that's Ava DuVernay's doing, because that's just who she is. Then that's not by accident, you know?
And to your point about that balance of masculine and feminine, then we also have Blue, who is a boy in body, but very in touch with his feelings, plays with a doll.
Right.
And, you know, we all know like how much of a, well, don't get me started on how that would be in real life, but even how it played out in the show, you know, that also forced people to kind of confront their own internalized preconceptions about what it means to be boy, right?
Correct. Right.
So yes, Ralph Angel, and this is kind of like paved the way for us to slide on home, is that like he's losing the same, I wrote that he's losing the same parent twice, which is to say he's losing the father figure twice. And you can see like he is hurt. He's now got this new like life milestone. And he's like, my plan was to, you know, show him this picture because we just had this conversation that morning.
Right.
Well, I'll let you talk before I say what I'm going to say. Go ahead. Because yes.
No, I was just going to say that was it. So for the record, I watched it this morning on demand, and I was laying in bed watching it, and I was like, okay, so I ain't cried yet. I ain't cried. Okay, Ralph Angel ain't made me cry. Good, we're doing good. And then the scene where he walks into the hospital room and he sees the empty bed, it's like that feeling of, like you said, that, oh my God, like I'm still grieving my father's death. That was only roughly 5 years ago, we could say in our time. And now this other father figure that I've developed a true like closeness father-son dynamic with is also gone, but not just of sudden old age, et cetera, but of police brutality would potentially be the cause of this. Like now I'm angry and sad. And man, when Prosper came around that corner, I was like, oh my God. Thank you. So happy you're still here. I just was like, I don't want to bury him yet. Come on. Can we just let him hang to the end of the season at least? But it was a win for me. I felt so I felt relieved, and I could see the relief on Ralph Angel's face, and also just the pride of like, yay, like my father isn't here for me to share this moment with, but you are my secondary parent in a sense. So it was good stuff.
I will comment on that scene when at the
Did I skip ahead? Sorry.
no. When we get to
Okay.
So yes, is that everyone? Yes. Okay. So full circle. We talked about this last week. This is bringing everyone back to Ernest's death, right?
Yes.
Because Charlie's talking to Billy about, I know what I wish I had done differently when my father was in the hospital.
Exactly. Right.
I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did.
Right.
And so, like, everybody, whether they're saying it out loud or not, everyone is reliving Ernest's death
They're
as they're
reliving that.
waiting to
Yeah.
find out what's him. What else, kind of overarching theme? Well, you talked about it definitely made you take that note, like, let me have this conversation with my parents, which is something that I had tried to do like a few times over the years, but I think I know for so many of us, it's challenging to say that there are upsides to the pandemic. But for me, one of the things
Right.
I definitely did do, especially because I did experience some loss close to me, is my mom is finally like, okay, you're right.
I'm ready.
I'm starting to fill out these forms. I,
Right.
signed up for this and that. So yeah, and it also helps that one of her sisters like works in the kind of end of life care space. So she's also in a position to talk to like all of their siblings
Yeah.
about like, listen, y'all, it's not a game. Like, you got to have your paperwork in order.
You do. You do. And it's one of those things, like it was literally in the first, scene when Billy came in and said, I'm his next of kin. I have a power of attorney. I have his supplemental insurance and his catastrophic insurance. And those are things that most people don't know. Most people think, oh, I have health insurance. Well, no, that just covers medical expenses to a certain extent.
Right.
Even if you have like a PPO and can go to whatever hospital you want to a certain extent. And unfortunately, in the small print that people don't realize is that specifically when it comes to implementing life-saving measures with Black patients who are elderly,
Right.
if you don't have an advocate or someone that you've appointed to be able to advocate for you when you're at that stage, because for Prosper, he wasn't necessarily at an end of life stage. He had a trauma that could have resulted in the end of his life. And the assumption that old people only die from being old is dumb, because obviously that's not, people die in car accidents, people die from all sorts of different things. So I hope that, again, the subtle nuances that this show provides for people is like, mental health matters. Make sure that when you have an elderly relative or even a neighbor, someone in your community, someone that you care about, have the conversation with them, because the conversation I have with my parents, it's uncomfortable because nobody wants to think about that part of life. However, the only certainty in life is that it ends. That's the only certainty. And when it comes to being in those situations, speaking from experience, when you have an elderly person who even is in their end of life stages, if there's not legal documentation in place, the hospital is trying to empty the bed at a certain point. That's their only goal, especially in the middle of a freaking pandemic.
Right.
They're trying to empty the bed. They don't give a shit about your relatives. They don't give a shit. They're going to make whatever recommendations and just get you out. But when you have a document that your loved one or you, for example, sat down and said, okay, this is what I want, that is the best gift you could possibly give to your family.
Her documentation also said, even if you suggest something way out, we could pay for it.
We could pay for it.
That is a huge thing too, because that's another thing. A lot of times the doctors are just trying to find the cheapest, quickest, whatever. And so they're like, no, we're not going to do additional tests. That's going to cost more. You probably can't.
That's extra money. Yep. And why would we want to do testing on somebody who's dying? We're not going to get our money. No, we're not going to do it.
Right. Okay. So I've made a point this time of not looking at the previews for next week, because
I didn't look at it either. I didn't look at it last week or this week.
Well, no, and when you said that last week, that's what made me be like, yeah, stop doing it.
I just want to be surprised.
But just in terms of what I think is coming up. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, friend. Quite sure that last scene was a dream. Raphael,
No,
Ralph Angel walked into a
no.
hospital room with a naked face. That is not happening. That wasn't real. I'm so sorry.
Damn it, he didn't have a mask
Neither of them had a
on.
mask on.
Oh,
And there's no visitation.
I need water
Because
now.
remember, not only even before they were barred from visiting as the Bordelon family, you're not strolling into hospital rooms during.
But Billy called the hospital and said it was okay for them
Okay, but
to
no,
come.
it don't. Visiting hours are not a thing right now.
He was better though. That's why they got to come see him. He's
No,
better. That's why he got to
hours do not exist right now. I have had some people go to the hospital for different things and I couldn't visit them because you can't visit people in the hospital right now.
Oh, it was a dream because
But
dreams never die.
yes. And also naked face. I'm so sorry. Now,
Now I
again,
have to cry
that's not to
again.
say that he has died already. I'm just saying that scene did not happen in life.
Oh man, you're right. You're right, and that's good TV. So yeah.
What about
Okay.
you? What are some of the other? Again,
Oh
I don't
man.
necessarily know if. Yeah, I
Well,
don't.
okay. So if that was a dream, that means that Prosper dies.
Or
Billy,
he's still super.
or he's in a medically induced coma, so
Right.
he's not awake. He's not standing up, moving around, pushed in
He's
a little cart.
definitely not standing
He's
up.
definitely not doing that. That means that Billy is going to lean on Nova for support,
Or Charlie.
and Nova's going to be, or Charlie, but she's going to lean on Nova for support because it's traumatic. And I'm going to go back to my, childhood, because where do I feel safe? I felt safe with Nova as a child. I'm going to go back there. Nova's going to be in this little web of stuff, as she usually is, between Dominic and, Charlie. I mean, not Charlie, Billy.
Are we talking about a love triangle?
Are we talking about it? Yes, ma'am. We're talking about a love triangle. That's what I see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She loves the triangle, though.
Oh my God. She loves, geometry was her favorite subject in school. She likes triangles.
Honest about the fact that she's poly.
She's poly. Just come out as poly, Nova. It's cool. Now don't go back and be with the white man, but you have two wonderfully attractive Black people as your in your I mean, not your circle, your triangle. But I see that. A part of me doesn't really see Charlie and Davis really doing it again.
Especially once she realizes, oh, if I'm looking at a bigger platform, I can't go back to the man who set a woman up to be raped.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Can't do that. No, can't do that. I think that Vi's going to come clean because Hollywood's not an idiot. Vi's going to come clean. But I still think we're going to see an appearance from
Jimmy Dale.
I think that's going to happen. Just because
he doesn't give up easily. He came looking for her decades later. You think
decades later,
look for the person who's still his wife
and has his child?
Right.
Yeah. Right. We're gonna see him again. Oh man, Prosper.
Well, again,
maybe we'll have more dreams like that. Maybe we'll have more dreams.
Well, and because clearly, I did happen to see when I was getting ready for this, and I was looking for what this episode's name was. The next episode title, like I said, it kind of sounds like a continuance of the thought. I don't remember what it is, and I wouldn't say it even if I did. But yeah, dreams in general definitely seem to be
okay.
Kind of the thread this season.
The thread.
The theme song and these titles so far. And that dream sequence. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Dang it.
All right. So thank you, y'all, for watching and listening. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell so that you can be informed when we drop these episodes. Jump in the comments, talk to us, talk to each other. There will also be links so that you can find out more about what we each do separately, because you see what we're doing together. And yes, we will see you again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yes. Peace, y'all.